Make some noise.
Throughout his half-century-long career, Ozzy Osbourne has been part of amazing songs. From being one of the founders behind heavy metal progenitors Black Sabbath to his own solo career, there are top-charting hits that are synonymous with him. At the same time, Ozzy has been no stranger to controversy outside of the repetitive moral panics that lead to nowhere. From alleged false statements about his songwriting credits to the treatment of his bandmates in his solo band throughout the decades. Though this controversy that is being covered in this video doesn't really have to do with him. As a lot of fans know, Ozzy never fully wrote his own songs, both in his solo career and in Black Sabbath. Not to fully discredit him, given his contributions in the past like melodies, his synth contributions on Sabbath's mid-70s output, to the lyrics on songs like Fairies Wear Boots on Paranoid, and The Writ on Sabotage. By the 80s, when his solo career began and having to start over, along with how his management handled the creative process that would rely on talented musicians writing the bulk of the music with minor input from Ozzy in order to receive songwriting credits, as well as sketchy practices that, as a result, musicians would not get royalties. Notoriously, back in 1986, his former bandmates on his first two solo albums, bassist Bob Daisley and the late drummer Lee Kerslake, would sue Jet Records, Don Arden's label, for unpaid royalties, but later learned that the Osbournes bought the rights to Ozzy's solo catalog and would file a lawsuit against the Osbournes in 1997. Out of sheer spite, the management would instruct other musicians who were in Ozzy's band at the time to replace their original drum and bass tracks on a later reissue of the albums in the early 2000s, decades later. Though with this hit song, it has a very different story, from allegations of theft to false claims about songwriting credit, to it eventually getting re-recorded by the very people who helped originally write it. Even to the point where, despite it being considered a popular hit song, has never appeared on an official compilation, with the exception of the original 1997 pressing of The Ozman Cometh. The song in question being Shot in the Dark.
You've been waiting for it, they're waiting for it, and the tune proudly presents Mr. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne!
Unlike many of Ozzy's hit songs, but in this case he wasn't aware of it, Shot in the Dark was not originally intended to be for him. While Bob Daisley and Jakey Lee with Ozzy are responsible for writing the material on The Ultimate Sin, the musician who would record the bass tracks on this album was a then unknown Phil Soussan, who is credited for only one song, that being Shot in the Dark. Prior to his tenure with Ozzy, Soussan was the bassist of the third and final lineup of a UK rock band known as Wildlife, which was comprised of future FM frontman Steve Overland, his brother and FM co-founder Chris Overland on guitar, Mark Booty on keyboards, and Simon Kirke of Free and Bad Company fame on drums. Wildlife would write and record a demo of Shot in the Dark in 1983. But wouldn't be released, and Soussan would later rework the song for Ozzy when he joined his band. This has led to the debate of who actually wrote the song. given how Soussan and Osbourne are credited, despite Steve Overland stating that he and others originally contributed to the song. So what do we know? When it comes to Soussan, it's hard to find a concrete answer as he has rarely spoken about Shot in the Dark in interviews. Given how most people aren't aware about the backstory of the song, it doesn't get brought up. There have only been 2 interviews where Phil has presented his side of the story. In an interview with Face Culture back in 2023, he said that the song was inspired by jazz musician Al Jarreau, but wanted to make a version of his music in a rock context. In the past, he has always claimed to have written the entire song and wrote the lyrics, but there have been contradictions to this claim. One of them being that Soussan's fellow Wildlife bandmates were not fond of his lyrics and would rewrite them, there being a contradiction to this as well. In response to a comment on his YouTube channel, Soussan stated that he wrote all the lyrics but his Wildlife bandmates would edit them. This could be a simple mistake of word choice. Soussan has claimed that the demo of Shot in the Dark was never released. Please keep this in mind for later. In a prior interview with Mitch LaFon back in 2020, Phil claimed that his Wildlife bandmates would make changes to the arrangement of the song, like lowering the tempo among other unspecified changes. After Wildlife broke up, Phil would pitch the song to 3 or 4 projects while in the UK outside of his normal job in order to pay bills, as he was not a full-time musician at the time. When joining Ozzy, his camp was looking to add another song to the Ultimate Sin album, and Soussan brought up the then-shelved Shot in the Dark, in which the lyrics would be changed by Ozzy. To everyone's surprise, the song would become a hit, and following the 1986 tour, Phil would move to Los Angeles. On the other side of the coin, we have Steve Overland, who has gone into detail about Shot in the Dark. According to Steve, Shot in the Dark was written by him, his brother Chris, and Phil Soussan at his mother's house in Norfolk. Steve has stated that his contributions were lyrics and vocal melodies, Chris wrote the riff and contributed to the lyrics, and Phil came up with the title as well as contributing to the lyrics with Steve and Chris. The song was intended to be recorded for the 3rd Wildlife album, their 2nd album with Soussan, but this wouldn't happen as their label, Swan Song Records, ceased operations the same year they recorded the demo of the song. This would have been the first studio album to feature the rhythm section that comprised of Soussan on bass and drummer Simon Kirke, replacing previous bassist and drummer Pete Jupp and Bob Skeet respectively. After Wildlife broke up, Soussan went over to the States and joined Ozzy's band and would present the song to him, in which Ozzy would change the lyrics. In an interview with Mitch LaFon back in 2020, this was Steve's reaction to finding out about the Ozzy version of his song.
Phil just took it, and I didn't know that Ozzy had cut. Do you know what? I was around my mother's house in Norfolk, which is in the countryside in the UK. There used to be a program here called The Tube. And one day I was standing in the kitchen making a cup of coffee, and this is the honest truth. I had no idea Ozzy had cut this song, right? And I'm standing in there, and all of a sudden I heard a and I'm like, I'm standing there with this cup of coffee, I'm thinking, what? And I walked in, and the video was on, because it was a massive hit in America at the time. I had no idea he'd even cut the song. And so I stood there and watched a song that I'd recorded previously with Ozzy having a massive hit with it, Phil throwing himself around in the background. I just thought, right then.
What's interesting is that FM's label at the time, Epic Records, as FM were label mates with Ozzy, advised Steve not to take legal action towards the Osbournes. Steve agreed with the label, as well as saying that it wasn't worth going after Phil because Steve has said that he isn't one to hold grudges. He was more focused on getting FM off the ground at the time, and that getting litigious would have tarnished his and FM's reputation. In regards of taking Phil to court, this is what Steve had to say about that hypothetical.
There's no point in going, I'm not one, I don't hold vendettas, it's not my thing, you know, and if Phil's got nothing to give me, then he's got nothing to give me. So there's no point in going after a guy for the sake of going after him. I found out that all the money he's made from the song, which would be a considerable amount, he's managed to get rid of, I think. So, you know, on whatever. Don't want to know, really. But,
Steve has also gone on record saying that if he and Phil were in the same room, they would talk about the song. Likely if they were on the same bill at a festival. In regards to the Osbournes, Steve has claimed that he is on good terms with Ozzy and Sharon, claiming Sharon came to him in regards to the song and that she had listened to the demo and discussed the song with Steve. One of the rare moments of generosity from Sharon.
Oh, fuck off! Get out!
Especially given what FM later went on to do. On November 26, 2012, FM released the Only Foolin' EP, their fourth release since their reunion in 2007, as they had broken up back in 1995 during the band's original run. On the EP was a re-recording of Shot in the Dark. The re-recording is a refined hard rock version of the original Wildlife demo. This re-recording would be featured as a bonus track on their 2016 re-recording of their debut album, Indiscreet, titled Indiscreet 30. On the liner notes of both the EP and the album, the writing credit is still credited to Phil Soussan and Ozzy Osbourne, despite Steve's claim of him and Chris originally contributing to the writing of the original song, as well as using the original lyrics that Steve wrote from the Wildlife demo. From what has been presented, there is a lot of interesting information when it comes to this song, and as stated before, none of this is Ozzy's fault, as he didn't know until after the fact. While researching, one can notice that there are two contradictions that are noticeable from both parties' statements. The first one being about songwriting credits. Overland claims to have written the lyrics and melodies of the song with his brother writing the music with Phil. Soussan claimed to have written the entire song and the lyrics with his Wildlife bandmates editing the lyrics, but also said he wrote completely different lyrics and his bandmates rewrote them, as well as stating that they made changes to the song. The other aforementioned contradiction is that Soussan claiming that the demo was never released. According to Steve, the original Wildlife version was played on the Tommy Vance show back in 1983. What doesn't help in this situation are the takedowns of re-uploads of the Wildlife demo of Shot in the Dark, which allegedly have been taken down by Soussan and the Osbourne camp. It should also be noted that on every version of The Ultimate Sin from 1995 onward, as well as the omission from the Ozman Cometh from 2002 onward, were due to alleged legal problems with Phil over unpaid royalties. But Phil later claimed that there was never a legal case. While doing research for this video, no articles or documents appeared showing that Soussan had a legal case against the Osbourne camp. It is likely that it is true and there was never a court case, or it could have been an undisclosed settlement, or nothing at all. Getting concrete information about this is very difficult. The only person that hasn't been mentioned up until now in this video is Chris Overland. Sadly, we'll never be able to get Chris's side of the story from the few interviews he did, as he has never spoken about Shot in the Dark. And he would pass away on August 22nd, 2023. He was 66 years old. At the end of the day, we'll never get a concrete answer. One is open about the song's origins, while the other suspiciously remains vague about the topic when asked about it. All we can do is try and piece what information is available to come up with a possible answer, while still being open to new information surfacing.